The silence after why. What happens when we stop asking why? Not the shallow whys, the kind that fill small talk or pass the time. Not why did he say that? Or why didn't I get that job? But the heavy ones. Why am I here? Why does it matter? Why continue? There's a silence that follows when we no longer ask these things. A quiet not of peace, but of something else, something denser. A kind of inner stillness that isn't rest, but resignation. We begin life asking why about everything. Why is the sky blue? Why do people leave? Why do I feel this way? And someone always has an answer. A parent, a teacher, a book, a belief system. We are given stories about purpose, progress, divinity, justice, love. Stories that are tidy, stories that serve. But as we grow, those stories wear thin. We start to see the frayed edges, the contradictions, the silence behind the explanations. And slowly, or suddenly, something cracks. The world no longer answers, and the questions begin to echo in our own heads, unreturned. So we ask them louder, hoping to stir something awake, but nothing stirs. And eventually, we stop asking. Not because we've found peace, but because we're tired. The silence after why is not a void, it is weight. It is the dense atmosphere of a life untethered, yet still moving. Camus called it absurd, the conflict between our need for meaning and the world's indifference to that need. To live, knowing that the world will never explain itself to us, is to live under a sky that does not answer. And yet, we go on, building our lives under that silent sky. We wake up, we make coffee, we go to work, we love people, we lose them, we keep breathing. Sometimes that's the greatest mystery, not why we die, but why we continue living in full awareness of death. Heidegger called this being toward death, a recognition not just that we will die, but that we are always moving toward it. And yet within that awareness lies something strangely sacred. Because when we stop pretending we'll live forever, our time becomes real, our choices become heavy, and our presence becomes urgent. But what happens when we no longer feel that urgency? What happens when even our awareness of mortality begins to fade into numbness? That's when the questions die. That's when the flame of curiosity flickers out, not in anger or drama, but in quiet fatigue. To stop asking why is not surrender. It's something quieter. It's sitting in a room and realizing the echo is gone. The danger isn't in losing answers. It's in losing the desire to ask. Because in the asking, there is movement. Even if the question circles endlessly, it moves. It pulls us forward, deeper, inward. It demands presence. Phenomenology tells us that reality is not something out there, waiting to be found. It's something that appears to us through our perception, our experience, our emotion. Meaning isn't hiding in the world. It's being shaped in us, constantly, in every conscious moment. So when the questions stop, the shaping stops. We settle, we function, we survive. But we no longer touch the edges of what we are. It's seductive, this silence. It feels like relief, like an escape from the burden of seeking. But it's a slow disappearance. We become outlines. We play roles. We perform. We get good at smiling, at saying what's expected, at laughing on cue. But beneath that, there is a hollowness, an emptiness that can't be filled with noise or novelty. And still, somewhere deep, we remember that there was once a why. It may not return as a shout. It may return as a whisper, as a restlessness, a sentence in a book, a line of music, a silent look from someone who seems to see us. And in that moment, the questioning stirs again. And maybe this time it's quieter, less demanding, less desperate, but it's real. Why do I feel this ache? Why does this moment matter? Why do I want to stay? These aren't the questions of logic. They're not academic. They're not even answerable. They are the questions that mark the beginning of presence. Maybe we don't ask why to find answers. Maybe we ask it to stay awake. Maybe the question itself is the connection to life, to ourselves, to each other. Even if the universe doesn't answer, the act of asking reveals something. It reveals us, our pain, our wonder, our capacity to hold both. In a culture addicted to answers, certainty, and speed, to ask a slow and unresolvable why is a quiet form of resistance. A refusal to be pacified by surface. It is a reclaiming of interiority. To be an introvert in a loud world is already a kind of rebellion. To stop performing and start listening inward, to let the world shrink to the size of a thought, and still feel whole. The questions you carry may never be answered. They may never even be spoken aloud, but they are sacred because they are yours. And maybe meaning isn't what we're given, but what we are. Maybe the act of living with questions is not a failure of understanding, but the beginning of wisdom. So what happens when we stop asking why? We forget what it means to be fully human. We forget that it was never about answers. It was about presence. It was about depth. It was about staying open, even in the face of silence. Even now, the question remains. And that's enough. That's more than enough. Because the moment you stop asking why is the moment you stop truly being.